Hello, sir.
Hello, how's it going?
Baruch Hashem. Doing well. I see I leave a mess in the bed over here.
We're both
In the guest room.
You're in the guest room? I just graduated from the nursery back to my office, so.
Oh, I see. I had this dream of having like these conversations actually in front of my bookcase, but like I'm not like taking out a table there every day in the middle of the living room to like hold court.
Yeah.
So the guest room will do. It's actually a nice guest room, but we're getting like a bad view of it. But you'll have to forgive me. You'll have to trust me when I tell you that it's mechubad.
Yeah.
Torah. Have you been having a good week so far?
Yeah, I've had a good week. Naftali's doing good. Baby's doing good.
Naftali. Beautiful name.
Yeah.
Did you think of any nicknames yet?
There's a lot. I mean, I guess until he responds, there's no really.
Right.
There's nothing is gonna catch too much. I feel like I don't know. But Nafi, Tuli.
My nephew's Naftali, so it's Tuli or Narf or Narf or Naftul.
Naftul, yeah.
But they're cute names.
Mm-hmm.
You know, random names. Another nephew of mine is Vulun, and we all call him Zusha. Yeah, so it's different names. And my son's named Ozzy, but his name is Kwanzaa or Kuba. It's all different names. Okay.
I'll bring it up.
Yeah, FYE. Paragraph E.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll finish it today. Probably not. Maybe next week, but today or next week.
Okay. Let me bring this up.
I remember that I ended with something about the Ashlag, talking about like his 4 stages,
right?
Which, connecting to the Rambam, sort of
Mm-hmm.
going back to finding, find that balance ultimately, right? Achieving the balance is what like we want to get to, like, it's that nuanced approach, and it requires, sometimes leaning towards like a bit to a certain extreme,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think we ended it on.
I don't know if it was 5, but I can take a look quickly. Oh yeah, I think it might be 4.
No, we did that. I think
We did. Oh yeah, we did that. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, we did this. We spoke about the doctor. We, of course, gave the hot and cold. We spoke about how like even his outdated example is still relevant, right? There's still like a nuance onto it, right?
Yeah.
And then we said like if we see that he's mefazer, he's doing something, so we're going to ask him to like go on the extreme. This is where like Gilad and I were having our little discussion with regards to, is he saying that he's leading towards, right, like the pendulum swing, I'm leaving towards a certain extreme. We spoke about the exposure therapy, and I was saying it's not bit by bit, but like we literally just immediately go into the elevator and experience that. But we continue going on through this. Yeah. Okay, exactly. And here we ended also saying that this is the balance that he needs to get to. And then I gave the example of the Ashlag about the balance between giver and receiver, God being the giver, us being the receiver, and the stages of adulthood, right? Like a baby only receives in order to receive, and it's fine for a baby, it's bad for an adult. And then the kid gets to giving in order to receive, right? I clean my room so I could get something from you. And then there's adolescence, which is just giving to give.
Yeah.
Spoke about that. Even, you even see that in suicide, unfortunately, sometimes. But and then we spoke about the person that's actually balanced that realized that he could receive in order to give, right? So I'm not saying I can't receive good things in my life. I can't say I can't be happy, but I realize that the good things that come to me, I absorb them, I enjoy them, and then I translate back into giving, right? Paying it forward, right? Paying it forward in theory means like you gave me a Maserati. That doesn't mean I now burn the Maserati or give it away. Rather means like I can enjoy the Maserati, and by doing so, paying it forward might be me giving you now like rides for the rest of the year for where you need to get to, but using that to give. And in that sense also, I mean, I don't know if we spent this last time, but the Ashlag really then sees like the other, almost the person you're giving to, almost as the creator, right? This is the person you want to give everything back to in a certain sense, right? And that has to do with seeing God's image in other people. And by doing that, this, the philosophy sort of all makes sense. If I see God in the other, then of course I want to give to him.
Right. It kind of reminds me of in Pirkei Avot. First of all, it gives me a visual of like it's like a fountain, or that keeps right. You get something, and then it's supposed to flow through you and go to
K'ma'ayan hamidgaber.
K'ma'ayan hamidgaber. Nicely put. But also in Pirkei Avot, there's a sense of balance, and right, mashe shelcha sheli, mashe shelo shelo.
Right.
Or like there are these different levels that you can, the different levels, and having something, having balance in that, like everything else that Rambam says, is appropriate.
המשכנו. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
ולזה העניין, לא היו החסידים מניחים תכונות נפשותיהם, תכונה ממוצעת בשווה, אך היו נוטים מעט לצד היתר או החסר, על דרך הסייג והשמירה. רצוני לומר על דרך משל, שהיו נוטים מן הזהירות, לצד היעדר הרגש, ההנאה מעט, ומן הגבורה לצד מסירות נפש וסכנות מעט. וטוב הלב לצד יתרון טוב הלב מעט, ומן הענווה לצד שפלות הרוח מעט. וכן בשאר העניינים. ועל זה העניין רמזו ואמרם לפנים משורת הדין. Let's stop there for a second.
Okay.
And that comes into, okay, yeah, so you could take that.
On this account, the saintly ones, the Hasidim, were not accustomed to cause their dispositions to maintain an exact balance between the two extremes, but deviated somewhat by way of caution and restraint, now to the side of exaggeration, and now to that of deficiency. Thus, for instance, abstinence would incline to some degree towards excessive denial of all pleasures, valor would approach somewhat towards temerity, generosity to lavishness, modesty to extreme humility, and so forth. This is what the rabbis hinted at in their saying, do more than the strict letter of the law demands.
Right, so let's just pause for a second and ask like why the Rambam is saying this, because the Rambam, of course, has to deal with the fact, right, that someone could say like, okay, it's very nice, the balance in the middle of the road. We know the Hasidim, right? We see them, we see how they behave. Right, so he has to discuss that even when this extreme behavior is observed by people, seeing like, the Hasidim, the righteous ones, how do they call them over here? The
saintly ones.
The saintly ones are these are temporary measures, right? These are just, again, these are aiming to counterbalance an extreme element and to get back into a certain middle path. But for most people, the goal is to live a balanced life all the time. It's really not to resort to these extremes. Rather, these Hasidim are saying like, we are already in a balanced place, and from this balanced place, now we want to even go a little extra. But again, these are for specific people. Just as like historical context, there are some people that argued that in the Talmud, when they talk about some of the Hasidim, they could be referencing people that might have been Essenes and Hasidim, or some sort of like cross-pollination that was going on at the time, but people that were, like we spoke about the self-flagellation and sort of being more these extreme measures.
Yeah.
Okay, אבל מה שעשו אותם החסידים, yeah, right? בקצת הזמנים, וקצת המקומות, וקצת האנשים, הם גם כן מנוטות אחר הקצה האחד. בצום, וקום בלילות, והנחת אכילת בשר ושתיית יין, והרחקת אנשים, ולבוש הצמר והשיער, שכונת הררים, והתבודדות במדברות. לא עשו דבר מזה, אלא על דרך רפואות, כמו שהזכרנו. ולהפסד אנשי המדינה גם כן, כשיראו שהם נפסדים בחברתם וראו פעולותיהם, עד שיפחדו מהפסד מידותיהם בעבורם. ועל כן ברחו להם למדברות, אוקיי? למקום שאין שם אדם רע. כאמר ירמיהו הנביא, עליו השלום, מי יתנני במדבר מלון אורחים, ועזבה את עמי והלכה מאיתם. כולם מנאפים עצרת בוגדים, right? I want to be out of this. I'm done with this party.
I think we just had this quote in Mesilat Yesharim too, or maybe I'm confused.
Could be.
Okay.
Does it continue more, or this is where they stop it?
This is where this paragraph stops, I think. Yeah.
What's the next paragraph? Okay, whatever. It's all good. I mean, you know what? We could
I can read that and then look. We can.
Let's continue reading.
Yeah.
It's a very long paragraph. Well, we say כהונה מרצים ובוגדים. Where's the pasuk? Okay, continue. Sorry, go on. וכאשר ראו הכסילים שהחסידים עשו אלו הפעולות ולא ידעו כוונתם, חשבו שהן טובות וכוונו עליהם, וחשבם שהיו כמותם, ויענו את גופתם בכל מיני עינוי, ויחשבו שהם קנו לעצמם מעלה ומידה טובה, ושעשו טובה, ושבזה יתקרב האדם לשם, כאילו השם יתברך שונא הגוף ורוצה לעובדו, והם לא ידעו שאלו הפעולות הרע, ושבהן תיגע מפחיתות הנפש, ואין להמשילם אלא לאיש שאינו יודע במלאכת הרפואות, again back to the doctor, כשיראה בקיאים מהרופאים שישקו חולים, נוטים למות, סמים ונקראים בעברית שחם, חנטל ומחמודה ובלעז, קולקונינטה ואשקמוניה. We'll see what the English translation is. והצבר ובלעז, אולואי וכיוצא בהם. Aloe vera. I don't know if it's aloe vera, I'm just saying that. ופסקו מהם המזון ונרפא מחולים ונמלטו מן המוות הצלה גמורה. ואמר הסקלו, אחר שאלו הדברים מרפאים מן החולי, כל שכן שעמדו את הבריא על בריאתו, או יוסיפו כוח. והתחיל לקחת אותם תמיד לנהג בהתנהגות החולים, שהוא יחלה בלא ספק. כן הם חולי הנפשות, אלו בלא ספק בלקחם הרפואות הבריאות. Let's continue. Because he's really saying a lot of the same things over here. This is a big deal now. וזאת התורה התמימה, המשלמת אותנו כמו שהעיד עליה יודעיה. תורת השם תמימה משיבת נפש. עדות השם נאמנה מחימת פתי, which we sing all the time. ולא זכרה דבר מזה. באומנם כוונה להיות האדם טבעי הולך בדרך האמצעי. יאכל מה שיש לו לאכול בשווי, וישתה מה שיש לו לשתות בשווי, ויבעל מה שמותר לו לבעול בשווי. וישכון במדינות ביושר ובאמונה, שלא ישכון במדברות ובהרים, ולא שילבש הצמר והשיער, ולא שיענה גופו. והזהיר מזה, לפי מה שבא בקבלה נאמר בנזיר, וכיפר עליו מאשר חטא על הנפש. ואמרו רבותינו זיכרונם לברכה, וכי איזה נפש חטא זה, אלא שעל צער עצמו מן היין. Right? It's famous thing we spoke about in the past in the corner, ועל דברים קל וחומר. מה זה שצער עצמו מן היין צריך כפרה, וצער עצמו בכל דבר ודבר על חד כמה וכמה. Okay, last portion. ודברי נביאנו וחכמנו תורתנו ראינו, שהיו מוכנים על השווי ושמירת נפשם וגופם, על מה שתחייב התורה, וענה השם יתברך על ידי נביאו למי ששאל לצום יום אחד בעולם אם יתמיד או לא, והוא אמרם לזכריה הנביא, האבקה בחודש החמישי הנזק אשר עשיתי זה כמה שנים. וענה אותם כי צמתם וספוד בחמישי ובשביעי וזה 70 שנה. הצום צמתי אני, וכי תאכלו וכי תשתו, הלא אתם אוכלים, אתם שותים. ואחר כך ציווה אותם ביוש ובמעלה לבד, לא בצום. והם אמרו להם, כה אמר השם צבאות לאמור, משפט אמר שפטו, וחסד ורחמים עשו איש את אחיו, ואלמנה ויתום וגר ועני אל תעשוקו ורע תשים אחיו אל תחשבו בלבם. ואמר אחר כך, כה אמר השם צבאות, צום רביעי וצום חמישי וצום השביעי וצום העשירי, יהיה לבית יהודה לששון ולשמחה ולמועדים טובים. והאמת והשלום אהבהו, ודע שהאמת הן מעלות השכליות, מפני שהן אמיתיות, לא ישתנו. כמו שזכרנו בפרק השני, והשלום הן מעלות המידות, אשר בהן יהיה השלום בעולם. So there's a lot of it there, but it's going to boil down. There's a lot of repetitiveness over there, but let's take it away in English.
Okay.
A lot there. Actually, not so much, but there's a lot there.
I think, yeah. Well, no.
No, and that portion as well, correct.
I think we stopped here in the middle. Here. Okay. When at times some of the pious ones deviated to one extreme by fasting or keeping nightly vigils, refraining from eating meat or drinking wine, renouncing sexual intercourse, clothing themselves in woolen and hairy garments, dwelling in the mountains and wandering about in the wilderness, they did so partly as a means of restoring the health of their souls, as we have explained above, and partly because of the immorality of the townspeople. When the pious saw that they themselves might become contaminated by association with evil men, or by constantly seeing their actions, fearing that their own morals might become corrupt on account of contact with them, they fled to the wilderness far from their society. As the prophet Jeremiah said, "Oh, that someone would grant me in the wilderness the dwelling of a wanderer, and I would quit my people and abandon them, for they are all adulterers, a troop of faithless evildoers."
By the way, it just shows the contrast with Moses. Obviously, like clearly they're all wrong, but he says, like, I'm not looking, give me the same fate that they have. But we'll continue.
Yeah. When the ignorant observed saintly men acting thus, not knowing their motives, they considered their deeds of themselves virtuous.
I wanted to pause for a second and just stress the first portion we just read right now, because we spoke about it a little earlier, saying that, like, when you're observing these other people, they're doing it because they're trying to get this balance. And then again, he's stressing, like, yeah, I'm not even talking about like these extreme behaviors that you see, right? It's not that like, oh, like he prayed a little longer, right? The fasting, all this stuff, and it shows us the mindset where like they want to really remove themselves from all things that are evil. This is also true about Hanoch, Enoch, according to some of the interpretation that God took him because God says, like, the nation is so bad and he doesn't even know how to relate to them. Like, this is due to some of what he's lacking, right? He doesn't know how to relate, but nevertheless, God sees that this is just torture for someone like this. He doesn't know how to help them, and he is so much more pious than them. It's just a complete mismatch. And which another reason is almost why you could say that Moses doesn't come into the land, right? Which is God is doing him a favor, saying, listen, you hit the rock, and you're Moses, right? These people are gonna drive you up the wall, right? Yeah. Like if you come into the land and you have to start dealing with like all these intricacies of the halakha in the land, they're gonna drive you crazy. So trust me, like by removing you from them, I'm actually benefiting you
from doing the work in the land, like outside of the desert, basically. Like when he's
you're complaining about water, they're gonna complain about 101 different stuff once they get into the land.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
And when the ignorant observed saintly men acting thus, not knowing their motives, they considered their deeds of themselves virtuous, and so blindly imitating their acts, thinking thereby to become like them, chastised their bodies with all kinds of affliction, imagining that they had acquired perfection and moral worth, and that by this means men would approach nearer to God, as if he had hated the human body and desired its destruction. It never dawned upon them, however, that these actions were bad and resulted in moral imperfection of the soul. Such men can only be compared to one who, ignorant of the art of healing, when he sees skillful physicians administering to those at the point of death, all kinds of medicines, aloe vera, aloe being one of them, and the like, and depriving them of food, in consequence of which they are completely cured and escape death, foolishly concludes that since these things cure sickness, they must be all the more efficacious in preserving the health or prolonging life.
Right? Like, again, we're saying, like, I'll use a current example. Like, everyone has to do a cold plunge, right? You have to have the cold plunge, and then you see, like, Joe Rogan's talking about how it's amazing, right? Are you running and kicking a bag and jumping and wrestling? And they're like, yeah. So, like, you push your body to a certain extreme where the cold plunge might be relevant for you, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're every day taking the cold plunge, but you're just a math teacher and, like, you have a normal day, like, dude, you're gonna freeze yourself to death. Like, your body's not gonna handle that, and that's not the way you're looking at it. You're like, you can't just cut and paste these things in any scenario.
Right, it needs to be relevant.
Don't take Advil when you feel healthy.
Of life.
It's not like giving you, like, oh, if I take Advil, it's like I took like 3 coffees. It's like an extra boost.
Yeah.
There is a medicine called Airborne, though, that a teacher made that you take on, like, 2 days before you get on a plane, and afterward, it, like, you know, it's like packed with zinc and other stuff, and, like, it gives you, like, an extra level of protection for your immune system, because the idea is, like, on the flight you're fully exposed. But generally speaking, I think the Rambam is touching on a very good point over here.
Yeah. So if a person should take those things constantly and treat himself as a sick person, then he would really become ill. Likewise, those who are spiritually well but have recourse to remedies will undoubtedly become morally ill. Interesting. So it's, I mean, he's in a way, he's kind of also for the saintly ones as well. There's a danger. It sounds like what he's saying is that even for them, there might be a danger in, like, overdoing it. Obviously, for the people that mistake their deeds as moral, but for the saintly ones as well. I mean, I can
we glossed over here. We're going to get to it about the Nazir, the Nazarite, but we see over there, like, he clearly is a pious man, but even there's an issue there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and there's stories in the Talmud, like, for example, I don't know the name. You might have it, of a sage that was so giving and to everybody else that his family couldn't eat.
Yep.
And he was chastised. Wasn't something that, okay. Let's continue. The perfect law which leads us to perfection, as one who knew it will testify, or as one who knew it well testifies by the words, the law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul.
The one who knows it well is referencing David over here, King David, right? We're saying, like, the guy was down with the Torah. He knew what we're talking about.
The law of the Lord is perfect, restoring the soul. The testimonies of the Lord are faithful, making wise the simple. Recommends the psalmist recommends none of these things, such as self-torture, flight from society, etc. On the contrary, it aims at men's following the path of moderation, in accordance with the dictates of nature, eating, drinking, enjoying legitimate sexual intercourse, all in moderation, living among people in honesty and uprightness, but not dwelling in the wilderness or in the mountains, or clothing oneself in garments of hair and wool, or afflicting the body. The law even warns us against these practices. If we interpret it according to what tradition tells us is the meaning of the passage concerning the Nazarite. And he, the priest, shall make, or the Kohen, shall make an atonement for him because he hath sinned against the soul. The rabbis ask, against what soul has he sinned? Against his own soul, because he has deprived himself of wine. Is this
a wine being indicative? He deprived himself from the gifts God created, right? He deprived himself from the gifts of the world.
Right. He took a vow to give away certain things. So they say, is this not, or Rambam says, is this not then a conclusion, kal v'chomer, a minori, a mechus? I don't know how to pronounce this.
1 second. We'll go back to the English for a second. It's like a kal v'chomer. How do they say
it's kal v'chomer, yeah. Like even more so, if one who deprives himself merely of wine must bring an atonement, how much more so incumbent is it upon
one who denies himself of every enjoyment, right?
Right. So by the words of our prophets and of the sages of our law, we see that they were bent upon moderation and the care of their souls and bodies in accordance with what the law prescribes and with the answer which God gave through his prophet to those who asked whether the fast day once a year should continue or not. They asked Zechariah, shall I weep in the 5th month with abstinence, as I have done already these many years? His answer was, when you fasted and mourned in the 5th and in the 7th month. Already these 70 years, did you in any wise fast for me? You for me. And if you do eat and if you do drink, are you not yourselves those that eat and yourselves those that drink? After that, end quote, after that he enjoined upon them justice and virtue alone and not fasting. When he said to them, thus had said the Lord of hosts, execute justice and show kindness and mercy every man to his brother. He said further, thus had said the Lord of hosts, the fast day of the 4th and the fast day of the 5th and the fast of the 7th and the fast of the 10th month shall become to the house of Judah gladness, joy, and merry festivals. Only love the truth and peace, your truth and peace. Know that by truth, the intellectual virtues are meant, for they are immutably true, as we have explained in chapter 2, and that by peace, the moral virtue are designated, for upon them depends the peace of the world.
So, first of all, thank you for reading that. That was a lot, but as we saw, there was a lot of repetitiveness over there, what we said in the earlier portion. And then here he goes through using the Nazarite example of one denying himself for stuff that while it is something that you can do, right? It's something that exists within the realm of halacha. Nevertheless, you bring a sin sacrifice for that. And then he gave the example of Zechariah of like sort of a culture dealing with the concepts of fasting, right? In a certain sense of saying like, that's our culture. However, Zechariah answers ultimately saying that like these days are supposed to become days of joy, right? It's not that we're there to punish ourselves. Rather, these are days that A, won't last forever, right? And B, they're there to build us spiritually, right? It's not there to bring us down. And he ends in a Maimonides fashion about talking about that truth is really, again, it's sort of the intellectual wisdom, right? Which is the knowledge of God. Because at the end, Rambam says like, after I gave all these explanations of why this is problematic, because of the balance and because of health and because psychologically and because spiritually, also this whole body situation is gobbledygook, right? Because ultimately it's all about thinking in his Aristotelian mind, it's all about, right, the intellect. Mm-hmm. And that's why like any focus really on the body is already a problem.
You're saying from the Rambam's position?
Well, look at this last thing he says over here. If you could scroll down. Okay, but it's a little further up. He says, love, ultimately what you need to do is all these days are really to be our joyous days, and you should love truth and peace. Right? Really the truth that you're supposed to love, this thing you're actually looking after is the intellect. It's not changing. Like we spoke about earlier, that's what his focus is on. Right? It's like find this peace in the proper in your proper behavior, and using that to manifest proper intellect also will lead obviously to world peace once everyone understands what they're supposed to be doing.
Right.
RJ Shalom, you're welcome to join us. If
we say shalom and is the malot midot, right? What did it say here? Peace, the moral virtues are designated. I mean, can that only come through behavior, right? Like the moral virtues, can they only be embodied through behavior? Is that, do you understand what I'm asking?
Moral virtues can be embodied through behavior, and
must be.
They must be embodied through behavior because you're playing in this world. However, the program you're running needs to be embodied, obviously, in the body you're in right now on the ground. This is the simulation we're playing. But ultimately, Rambam is saying that like there's only so much you get connected to the simulation. At the end of the day, it's all about the data, and I don't know what the gaming term would be. It's basically like what your character has basically got in his toolkit throughout the whole journey of the thing. Now that's going to happen through embodiment, but what you take from you, right? When I'm going to digitize you to the next level, to the next simulation called the world to come, all I'm keeping from you is what the wisdom and intellect you've gained throughout this process. It's not going to be anymore like you're going to be paladin level 17, but it doesn't matter what kind of size boots you have on, or do you have the gloves of what's it called. It really matters.
But isn't what a person is buried with is his mitzvot? And mitzvot they're not necessarily intellectual, right? I mean, they are embodied. They are things that you do with your body in this world. Yes, in order to connect to the intellect, right? In order to fully better, I'm saying, behaving in that matter allows you to be an oriented person. I mean, this is what his whole argument about the mitzvot are already allowing you to. Well, he's going to get there. Shuva l'kavanati, that the Torah is going to allow us to, by acting in these ways and doing these mitzvahs, it naturally orients us properly to be in that place where we're balanced. And by being in that place where we're balanced, then we could properly walk through life and then have that intellectual transcendence. Okay. Interesting, because I mean, I might be misunderstanding this, or maybe it's just a different view. I don't know if it's correct, but the way that Rambam puts it here seems to me more even. If we are allowed to bring any kind of Kabbalah in the Rambam discussion, is like,
we brought in Ashlag last week. You can
right. The sichliot, the marot sichliot is like the Chabad, right? Like your emet is like connected with Chabad, and the midot, the shalom, the midot themselves is like the emotional, right? Is like the embodied. So he's kind of. It seems to me like the way you were saying it seems like you're saying the emphasis is obviously on the intellectual and like having that, and that is what is eternal and goes with you to the world to come. And I'm sure that's like I'm not saying that's not valid. I'm just saying that to me it also seems like he might be saying like that the intellectual plus the emotional come together. I mean, emet v'shalom represent two sides that you need to bring together.
You're bringing up a point over here, which after we read the next part, maybe we'll get into. I think it makes sense over here to bring it up, which is this big dispute between the Rambam, Maimonides, and the Ramban, Nachmanides, with regards to holiness or kedushim to you, specifically the commandment to be holy, for I am holy. But let's read this portion, and then we'll get into that. Maybe that will explain a little bit the tension you're teasing out over here.
Let's do it.
Where were we? Okay. V'ashuv el kavanati. I'll reiterate what I was saying. She'im yamru. I'm not saying that. The Rambam's saying that. She'im yamru elo hamidamim ba'umot me'anshei toratenu she'eini medaber ela bahem she'em einam osim ma she'osim oto מהטריחות גופתם ופסוק הנאותם, אלא על דרך הלימוד לכוחות הנפש, כדי שיהיו נוטים על הצעד האחר מעט, כפי מה שארנו בזה הפרק, שראוי שיהיה אדם כן, זוהי טעות מהם, כאשר הבאר, וזהו שהתורה לא אסרה מה שאסרה, זה big sentence, ולא ציוותה מה שהיא ציוותה, אל מפני זאת הסיבה. רצוני לומר, כדי שנתרחק מן הצעד האחד יותר לצד ההרגל. שאיסור המאכלות האסורות כולם, ואיסור הבעילות האסורות, והזרה על הקדשה, ומה שהצריך בכתובות האישה וקדושיה, אם כל זה אינה מותרת תמיד, אבל תאסר בעת הנידות והלידה, עם כל זה גזרו רבותינו, זיכרונם לברכה, למעט המשגל ומנעהו ביום, כמו שברנו בסנהדרין, זה כולו. אמנם צווינו השם יתברך להתרחק מקצה רוב התאווה הרחוק גדול, ולצאת מן המוצא אל הצד ההיעדר, הרגשת ההנאה מעט, עד שתתחייב ותתחזק בנפשותנו תכונת הזהירות. Take it away.
Okay. But to resume, should those of our co-religionists, and it is of them alone that I speak, who imitate the followers of other religions, maintain that when they torment their bodies and renounce every joy, that they do so merely to discipline the faculties of their souls by inclining somewhat to one extreme, as is proper, and in accordance with our own recommendations in this chapter, our answer is that they are in error. And I shall demonstrate.
Let's just, sorry for a second, let's just tease out the question, which is, one second, Rambam. You said that some people, at the end of the day, need to lean a little, right, to one extremity to create this balance. So why can't we just say that when I go fasting for 30 days and I'm self-flagellating myself, that should be classified as me leaning to a certain extremity, right? And we just said that in some cases that's allowed. So why is that not a big deal? Now he compares this saying they're doing so influenced by other religions also, and then he says like this is not the case. It's still there in error. Why?
Right.
As I shall now demonstrate.
The law did not lay down its prohibitions or enjoin its commandments except for just this purpose, namely that by its disciplinary effects we may persistently maintain the proper distance from either extreme. For the restrictions regarding all the forbidden foods, the prohibition of illicit intercourse, the forewarning against prostitution, the duty of performing the legal marriage rites, which nevertheless does not permit intercourse at all times, as for instance during the period of menstruation and after childbirth, besides its being otherwise restricted by our sages and entirely interdicted during the daytime, as we have explained in the tractate Sanhedrin. All of this God commanded in order that we should keep entirely distant from the extreme of an inordinate indulgence of the passions, and even departing from the exact medium should incline somewhat towards self-denial, so that there may be firmly rooted in our souls the disposition for moderation.
Right. Okay. So we spoke about that question, right? And then he basically gives his answer that it's the Torah commandments themselves are designed really to guide a person naturally towards the right balance, right? Without needing for a self-imposed extremes, which someone can come and say, listen, Rambam, you said that's okay, so I'm doing this. So Rambam says it's novel.
It's built in.
Correct. It's built into the system. And he's going to give explanations of this, but now this is sort of what we were talking about this idea you're talking about, like, is it a mixture of like the embodied mitzvahs and just the intellect? So what Rambam is also suggesting is by, adhering to the mitzvahs, keeping the mitzvahs, the commandments, a person achieves kedusha, right? And this is reflected in the words we use, right? When we make a bracha, asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav, right? He sanctified us with his commandments. And in this view, holiness it's a byproduct of following the Torah, which is emphasizing really the wisdom and the balance it creates, right? It's about understanding that you need to do this, and by doing this, by taking on these commandments, you are making yourself holy. Now, the Ramban, Nachmanides, on the other hand, he really looks at Kedoshim to you as it's really a distinct directive, right? He's saying that we spoke about this before about naval, about it's connected to being naval b'shuta Torah, right? Which is it's like a scoundrel within like the permissions of the Torah, right? I'm trying to indulge in things that are technically permissible but are morally questionable, right? So I'm pushing my edges over there. And this view really, he's highlighting that the focus is on the physical restraints going beyond the basic commandments. Right. So he's going to say that, like, no, it's a physical thing, that by doing this, I rectify the body. And by rectify the body, I now become holy. And my mind is looking at it from a different point of view, right? He's starting is going to be bottom down, right? My wisdom is going to realize that, and by there I'm going to understand that I need to keep these commandments. So like really this distinction or like this tension that you're talking about is really how they even perceive holiness, right?
Yeah.
So Maimonides, the Rambam's emphasis on wisdom, it was balanced through the commandments, while the Ramban really stresses the active effort to avoid access, even if it's permissible, right? Naval B'Shut Torah, because only that way I can rectify the body.
Interesting.
Hemshachnu. Now he's going to give us examples of, I believe, of all these things where we see the Torah is actually acting as these counterbalances.
Right. I mean, he already gave us the sexual prohibitions, that even within a permitted structure, you still have prohibitions that keep your passions in check, right?
Correct.
And now he's going to give us another one.
That reminds me. So maybe we'll get it later. I'm thinking about this idea about a wedding, but it has to come back to me. I just want to look back at some comments over here. I see Young God's here. What's up, Young God? What's up, Tayo? What's up, RJ? And yes, extremes and boundaries. No wonder it can be perplexing. Bada boom, smash the guide to the perplex. Very funny. Okay, take it away.
I think the Hebrew is you, right?
I'm the Hebrew. וכן כל מה שבתורה, כנתינת המעשרות, והלקט, והשכחה, והפאה, והפרת, והעלולות, ודין השמיטה והיובל, והצדקה די מחסורו. אוקיי? זה כולו קרוב מיתרון טוב לבב, עד שנתרחק מקצה הנבלה, ורחוק רחוק גדול מתקרב לקצה יתרון טוב לבב, עד שיתחזק לנו לב טוב. ובזאת הבחינה בחן רוב המצוות, תמצא כולם שהן מלמדות ומרגילות כוחות הנפש, כמו שאסרה הנקימה והנטירה וגאולת אדם באומרו, לא תקום ולא תיטור, עזוב תעזוב עמו, הקם תקים עמו, עד שיחלש כוח הכעס והרוגז. וכן השב תשיבם, עד שתסור תכונת החילוט. וכן מפני שיבה תקום וידעת בזקן, כבד את אביך ואת אמך. לא תסור מן הדבר אשר יגידו לך ימין ושמאל, עד שתסור תכונות הזאת, I just continued the verse, sorry, עד שתסור תכונות הזאת ותגיע תכונות הבושת. ואחר כך הרחיק מן הקצה האחרון. רצוני לומר רוב הבושת, ואמר הוכח תכריח את עמיתך, לא תגור מפני איש, עד שיסור רוב הבושת גם כן וישר בדרך האמצעי. We spoke about this last time we were talking about בושת. וכשיבוא האיש לסכל בלא ספק וישתדל להוסיף על אלו דברים, כמו שיוסר המאכל והמשתה, מוסף על מה שנאסר מן המאכלים, או יוסר הזיווג יותר על מה שנאסר הבעילות, וייתן כל ממונו לעניים, like you just gave an example, או להקדש, מוסף על מה שבתורה על הקדשות ועל הצדקות, ועל הערכים, יהיה עושה מעשה הרעים והוא לא ידע, ויגיע אל הקצה האחר ויצא מן המוצא לגמרי. ולחכמים בזה העניין דבר, לא שמעתי כלל יותר נפלא ממנו. והוא בגמרא, דיבני מערבה בפרק ה-90 הנדרים, דבר בגנות המקבלים על עצמם שבועות ונדרים עד שישארו כאין אסורים. אמרו שם בזה הלשון, אמר רב אידי בשם רבי יצחק, לא דין במה שאסרה התורה, אלא שאתה אוסר עליך דברים אחרים. וזה העניין שזכינו בשווה בלא תוספת חיסרון.
Take it away. Go for it. Okay. Likewise, all that is contained in the law concerning the giving of tithes, the gleaning of the harvest. Tithing, right. The gleaning of the harvest is very difficult for a non-English speaker. The gleaning of the harvest, the forgotten sheaves, the single grapes, and the small bunches in the vineyards for the poor, the law of the sabbatical year and of the Jubilee, the giving of charity, according to the wants of the needy one, all these approach the extreme of lavishness to be practiced in order that we may depart far from its opposite, stinginess, and thus nearing the extreme of excessive prodigality. there may become instilled in us the quality of generosity. If you should test most of the commandments from this point of view, you would find that they are all for the discipline and guidance of the faculties of the soul. Thus, the law forbids revenge, or the bearing of a grudge, and the blood revenge by saying, "Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge," or "Thou shalt surely unload with him the donkey of the one that hates you. Thou shalt surely help him to lift them up again. The donkey or the ox of which has of the person that was falling up by the way." These commandments are intended to weaken the force of wrath or anger. Likewise, the command, "Thou shalt surely bring them back," your brother's ox or a lamb which has gone astray, is meant to remove the disposition of avarice. Similarly, "Before the hoary head shalt thou rise up, and honor the face of the old man," or "Honor thy father and honor thy father and thy mother," etc. "Thou shalt not depart from the sentence which they may tell thee," etc. All of these are intended to do away with boldness and to produce modesty. Then, in order to keep away from the other extreme, i.e. of excessive bashfulness, we are told, "Thou shalt indeed rebuke thy neighbor," etc. "Thou shalt not fear him," the false prophet, etc. So that excessive bashfulness too should disappear, in order that we pursue the medium course. Should, however, anyone who would without doubt be foolish if he did so try to enforce these commands with additional rigor, as for instance by prohibiting eating and drinking more than does the law, or by restricting connubial intercourse to a greater degree, or by distributing all of his money among the poor, or using it for sacred purposes more freely than the law requires, or by spending it entirely upon sacred objects and upon the sanctuary, he would indeed be performing improper acts and would be unconsciously going to either one or the other extreme, thus forsaking completely the proper meaning. In this connection, I've never heard a more remarkable saying than that of the rabbis, found in the Brasinian or Yerushalmi Talmud, in the 9th chapter of the treatise Nedarim, where they greatly blame those who bind themselves by oaths and vows, in consequence of which they are fettered like prisoners. The exact words they use are, "Said Rabbi Idi in the name of Rabbi Isaac, dost thou not think that what the law prohibits us is sufficient for us, that you take these upon yourself, these additional prohibitions?"
You could argue that about fences, right? We obviously have fences in the Torah, and be like, but obviously there too, the magic word is balance, right?
Right. Don't add and don't detract.
Right. So the Rambam goes through a whole list of different things over here. Well, let's touch upon some of them. First of all, he starts with the Trumot Ma'asrot, right? The offerings and the tithing. So just to put things in context, I'm Joe and I have a field, right? Now I have to, I need to give a portion to Bikurim, right? So that's a very big portion that I need to bring. And then I also have Maaser Rishon, Maaser Sheni, Maaser Ani, right? I need to be giving all the other portions. And then I have to also leave the corners of the field. And then there's also Shichacha, right? There's Leket, there's the things I need to leave behind that I don't pick it up as I walk around. And then now there's a tremendous amount of my crops right here that you're already biting into. Then there's the Shemitah year, right? Which is my whole field is basically open for everyone. Then there's the Jubilee year, which for 2 more years it's open for everyone. Right. So this really is emphasizing this cycle of self-restraint, really, which is like, again, breaking this tendency towards nevela, right, or chisaron, or being too frugal or not giving, right? So it's built really much into the system. Same thing with lotikom and lotitor, right? The not to be bear a grudge or be vengeful. The Torah is really trying to, and the Rambam is interpreting the Torah, and rightfully so, as really curbing this natural instinct towards like anger, right? Or resentment towards other people, and really telling them as much as possible, trying to reconciliation, understanding one another, and trying to guard, again, towards a balanced life. We also see it, which is more interesting, which is Geulat Adam, right? Like Goel Adam, or what do they call it in English over here? The
Goel Adam,
which would be like it's not like an honor death, but you kill someone.
Blood.
What do they call it in English? In this translation here?
Revenge, blood revenge.
A blood revenge. Okay, so this is just putting us like in ancient times. Obviously, people want revenge for various different situations, and the Torah comes and says, "I'm going to restrict it only to murder." Right?
Mm-hmm.
In that case, and even once it does that, it's really doing everything it can to sort of tightly controlled, right? This is where he needs to go, and you can only do this, and this is the time. So even that almost is not going to happen. And then you have to bring in the base din, of course, like we spoke about many times, that even to actually on the ground manifest these commandments is make it very, very difficult to actually do, right? We're trying to avoid as much as possible. But again, it's being said in a certain context. Why is the Torah even offering this? Because we're still talking to a society around that we can't wholesale them, suddenly tell them none of this makes sense anymore. But ultimately, this does allow, creating a system like this does allow you to, reserve revenge for specific circumstances, and allows us to emphasize the importance of justice over like unchecked vengeance at the end of the day by doing a system like this. And obviously, we are supposed to progress all the time about that. And I mean, to anyone listening to this that wants to challenge this, obviously, right, we do know that God tells Moses to seek vengeance against the Midianites, right? So we just said no vengeance, and now obviously the Torah is giving a vengeance. And apropos where we are right now in Israel currently, that's a big question about our war, right? Is there's vengefulness and there's vengeance, right? So I would say that the directive, the commandment that Moses is getting in certain cases is really, there needs to be a strong response to uphold justice and moral order, right? So the argument would be that when a nation's moral fabric is really under threat, then you need, when the Midianites try to drag Israel into a fight and drag them into prostitution and idol worship, right? So this is also referenced in the Rambam himself, in the Moreh, in the Guide to the Perplexed, where he states that showing mercy for the wicked ultimately could be harmful for the greater good, right? And this is really stressing the fact that vengeance, when commanded in the Torah, is about restoring a balance and protecting community values. It's not about getting back at someone. Rather, it says, if we don't stop these people right now, it's going to lead to further degradation in the moral fabric of society.
Mm-hmm.
I would also mention over here, just because if we're looking at vengeance, we also have to look at also hate in a certain sense. And he gives a verse over here about Tireh Chamor Sonecha Rovetz, right? You see the donkey of someone you hate falling under the weight of his carry-on, you're going to. But then we should really ask, who is this enemy that I'm supposedly hating? Because we just said earlier that this is something that I'm trying to obviously avoid. So here, we spoke about it a few portions ago. It's a great emphasis of this is how hate is viewed in the Torah is not as the way we see it today is absolute rejection of someone else. Rather, it is like we spoke about evil, it's love on a spectrum, right? It means I love you less. Now we could see this in, I don't remember the exact verse, but it talks about how Jacob loved, he loved Jacob, Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next verse, it says, Vayireh Hashem et Leah kesnua. God saw that Leah was hated, which means we know that Jacob still loves her. He just loves her less than Rachel. And that loving less is already considered hate. But again, that's not a rejection. That's just a lesser love. And we could even see this in the commandment of the V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? That you could ask listen, we know human psychology. I can't help but hate this person. The Torah comes and tells you, no, you could control love. The tools you need to do that, we speak about this all the time, ladun lekavschut, right? I need to be able to exercise. I'm going to force myself to sort of love you. And we even see this in this from the pasuk, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, love thy neighbor as yourself. We also learned from this that the Sanhedrin would give you a honorable killing, which means there's a difference between loving and not showing mercy, right? I could decide that you now, because of what you did, I can't show you mercy and you need to be put to death. However, that doesn't mean that the death needs to be disrespectful, right? Or we see a great example of this with the malkut, with the lashes. If I start lashing someone because transgression, and then he starts to urinate or throw up, we stop. Because we're not here to punish you necessarily. It's out of love that we're here to sort of educate and rebuke. We're not here to dishonor you. So if you're going to start losing control over your bodily fluids, we're going to stop until you gain control again, because it's not here to stress this kind of dishonor. And the only reason I mention this is because this relates to hate, and this relates also to vengefulness that the Rambam is talking about over here as well.
But these sound like there are extreme measures that are meted out at times that necessitate them.
Correct.
Right. Just like that. For the individual, we was talking about the saintly person that needs to remove himself from society. That is also an extreme measure. That is not like you don't just malkot. You don't just flail people, or I forget how do you say that.
Lash them
for anything, right? It's an extreme measure that is done at an appropriate time.
Correct. And when done so respectfully and appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
Then he also speaks about right, honoring one's parents. Here too, we obviously could ask, isn't that sort of obvious about loving one's mother and father? There's a Buddhist, it's called the Edicts of Ashoka. The reason I'm thinking about this recently is because my son was talking about this Star Wars movie called Ashoka. There's a character called Ashoka. So in the Edicts of Ashoka, this is during the Second Temple, I believe the Second Temple, and he becomes a Buddhist, and he writes all these edicts that you could find them all over Pakistan and all over walls. They're still here. And he says, like, in the past, a lot of his edicts are sort of like, people used to not do this, now we're going to do this. But he talks about how people didn't honor parents and teachers. So it was a novel thing that the Torah comes and says that you need to honor these people, right? Obviously, psychologically, we also know about this big tension between parents and children. So this too is like, we're being told over here to try to control these emotions that we have and realize that we have to create, obviously, this balance. I'll just end this portion by saying, it's 5:58, that Rambam also does stress, though, in other places that you still do, and this goes back to the giving and the receiving, you still need to enjoy your reality over here and the simulation over here, as far as how it's embodied, right? He gives an example in Hanagata Briut. He talks about how you need to play music that's uplifting, and you need to laugh with your friends, and if there's someone sick, you have to tell them good stories to lift, so he's obviously aware that there's bodily things that we're supposed to enjoy, the Shabbat, obviously. You and I learned in Pirkei Avot, right? That in Pirkei Avot, chapter 6, about pat omelach tochel v'mayim b'mesurat tishteh, right? That you need to be eating bread, and if you need to lie down on the floor, if you don't have a bed, you're gonna lie down on the floor. But we have to realize that there we could ask, like, are we talking about like it's self-deprecating and I'm hurting myself? That's just talking about how the ideal is Torah, and we'll do anything to learn Torah, but not that the sacrifice is the ideal, right? The Torah doesn't idealize suffering. We're just saying that could happen.
Right. You just need to know what works for you, and will get you to that point to get closer to God and to do all those things, or to improve your faculties. Like, what do you need to do that, right? I mean, I think in the Tanya I just read recently, it relates about, I think it was Rava that said that I need, paraphrasing, but I need steak and wine to get me ready for learning Torah, right? And that was Rava. That was like a big sage that was right. This is what he needed, and he needed that, and he had that, and then he went on, and he was a great person, right? So you need to know, just like you said, right? You need to know, are you sacrificing too much? Are you right on one side, or are you indulging yourself too much on the other side? Where can you get to that point that really gets you to be the best at improving yourself, your faculties, and
Right.
what the Rambam talks about.
If you look at, there's Yom Kippur, right? So you could argue like, look, you're fasting, right? But here again, the fast is not a punishment. Rather, it's there to cleanse the mind, right? This is also why after the fast, you have a Seudat Mitzvah, right? It's a commanded celebration. And if it was just eating because you now could eat, the fast is over, there wouldn't be a commandment for a celebration. Rather, now that I'm holy, I could eat. And so we want you to eat from this sanctified, cleansed place.
Right.
I mean, mistakenly, people think that Yom Kippur is the most holy day. Really, Simchat Torah is the holiest day. And the reason is because all the other holidays have restrictions, right? Like on Pesach, I'm eating, but I can't have bread. And on Sukkot, I could eat whatever I want, but I can't be in the house. And on Rosh Hashanah, I could eat, but I'm terrified of Judgment Day. On Simchat Torah, it's just a day where I could fully enjoy pleasure. And you also sort of need a day like that, because if you didn't have a day like that, if you didn't have like the hall pass day, so to speak, life would be hell. Rav Yehuda Leon Ashkenazi would say that there's nothing more special than the wedding day, specifically standing under the canopy, under the chuppah. Because at that moment, both the evil inclination and the good inclination want the same thing. And that's a moment that is very, very, very rare, where like both of them just want to be with this woman. And it's both are oriented towards the same direction. So it's pure joy that can be experienced through all of your facilities and all of your inclinations. On that romantic point, we'll end. Next week we'll finish. Next week we'll finish Vav. Sorry, we'll finish
Dalet.
We'll finish 4, and we'll move on to the 5th parak, the 5th out of 8.
Nice.
Ben, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm going to hang for another minute. If anyone wants to join on, complain, get mad, challenge, yell, scream. All right, one more minute, and then I'm out unless anyone joins. And again, zero pressure to join. I'm just have a little more time. And I'm always down to schmooze. All right. Catch you kids later.